Wonderful. Thank you, Lois. So my name is Andre Forsythe, as Lois mentioned. I'm the founder of Canadian Community Challenge, formerly Canadian Climate Challenge, and the project leader for the School for Climate Justice, and particularly the Earth Hub Solidar City project that we will be talking about today that's taking place at 5 Bancroft Avenue. Minh-Ly, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Minh-Ly. I'm the executive assistant or youth director of School for Climate Justice. I've recently taken on this work with Andre at the U of T, and I'm also a climate justice organizer. I've done a lot of work with students on campaigns and around the campus, and also an alumni at U of T. So I'm excited to kind of talk about our project and kind of delve like what connects me to this project and how people can also get involved if they wanted to. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Minh-Ly. And so, as Lois mentioned, so we're going to be a little bit more conversational today than usual. I think we've all sat, it's end of term, so I think everybody has sat in lectures and been a recipient in the audience. And so we're going to try and make this a little bit more dynamic than that. So, and make this a little bit more participatory. And so I started with a question that I asked Minh-Ly and Lois, and if we can put it in the chat after. And the question that I asked them before we came on this call today was, what is a piece of art that has helped you express or define who you are in your life? And so I don't know which one of you did either of you answer that question?
Lois, do you want to start?
Sure, yeah. So I guess I was thinking about that question on what a piece of art, and I was thinking of the play Les Miserables. Yeah. Yeah, I was like in that play as a child. Just
No,
no,
really?
not the actual play, sorry. School
Oh
play.
yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah, very minor. But yeah, I think that sort of, the topic of injustice and sort of like resistance to that. And there's a lot of things that I think kind of I don't know, that stuck with me, I guess, from that moment. Yeah.
So for those who haven't seen Les Mis, was there something particular about Les Mis that resonated with you or helped you express who you are or that you connected with?
Yeah, I think it's been, I think, just interesting sort of putting myself in the shoes, I guess, of like a child who Cosette is like the child at the beginning, and she doesn't have, like, she loses touch with her family and stuff. And so it just kind of putting myself in the shoes of someone like that, I think that like really forms sort of the understanding of like how do you sort of exist in the world, knowing that folks have like different experiences and multiple experiences. So I think that's
I
something
love
that
that.
could, yeah.
I love that. Very important lesson to learn to look at things through. So I was with Professor John Robinson recently in this space, and we were talking about the varied lived experiences that exist in one place, all of which are true, but all of which are different, and the importance of recognizing that all of those realities um, all exist at the same time for different people and experiences. So I think that, which is an extremely important um, understanding and experience to be able, and skill set to be able to bring to your work. So I love that. I love that response. Minh-Ly, do you have yours?
Yeah, I have mine. I was thinking of this like quite like a lot, and I was kind of went back to kind of more of a traditional like visual painting of art,
Mm,
of like impressionist art, of like one specific artist was Claude Monet. It's kind of like also part of me because my grandmother is a French, like my French side, and really loved like anything like the French kind of Claude Monet kind of painting. So it kind of reminds me of my identity, but also like I feel like the colors, the anything like with colors and different like that's like on a painting, and it always like, I don't know, it always gives me emotions of seeing like different colors and different like in that kind of like impressionist side. So like as a kid, I would always like see that kind of painting in like a museum in France, and I was like, oh, this is beautiful. But also it like gives you emotions around the environment, around nature, around like um, it like it visualizes nature in a different way. And I always, yeah, it's like something that the art that always like um holds me, like that's always inside me, I guess. Even though it's like, I guess it's like a visual traditional art, but I think it's like always there for me.
Um, and what? Sorry, and for anyone who didn't hear, was the title of the painting?
The title of the painting, I feel like there's like so many ones. I know
Oh,
the
or are you
artist
just
for
speaking
Monet.
about Claude? Are you just speaking about Monet in general? Oh, okay, okay.
Not in
Oh,
general, yeah, his style of painting.
okay.
And I also painted as like in high school, so I always wanted to paint in impressionist style. So this is why like I kind of that artist is just kind of like
So I love.
resonates with me a
So
lot.
sorry, my apologies. I thought I was like, did I miss that she was referring to a specific painting? So I'm glad. Thank you for clarifying. Um, so my answer is, as always, is a lot longer than most. But my when I was first, this question was asked to me in one of the research projects that we were doing, and it's become a big part of our engagement. And so the first thing that came to me right off the bat was the play Rent. So Rent came out when I was in high school, not to date myself. And for anyone who's not familiar with Rent, it's a story set in Manhattan. In for anyone who missed the play, you can see the movie. It's very good. Originals going through in high school, struggling with identity, figuring out who I was, and comes this beautiful play. Thriving and celebrating and overcoming this challenge. So coming up positive finish, how much it is played for me is kind of counterculture to share the difficulty and the beauty of go or the challenges. So, and it's in Manhattan, so there's obviously drugs are a big part of that. So there's so many things. And yeah, in high school, obviously, most things are most subject matters are very tailored for your appropriate age. But here came this piece by Jonathan Larson. It was absolutely beautiful, and touched on all of these topics that resonate with you as a high school student and that we were going through at the time. And so that for me, but it's like that's the one that always comes up to me first. But it dovetails into more on the role of arts. So in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the calls to action, there's 94, and numbers 79 to 86 are about the arts. So we have a tendency to diminish the role of the arts and think of it very much as something like a creative project or something nice around your home. Um, but really, it's a lot. It's about a lot more than that. It's about creativity and the role that the arts played for us or all of us is more important than we realize. When I wake up in the morning, the first thing I do is put on music. Second thing I do is read the news. My ability to process and do anything positive with that news is directly connected to whether I have music on or not. Can I set my goals? Can I reach my goals? How do I process this? Do I process this in a productive way? Can I overcome the normally difficult news that's on there? Is so deeply connected to whether I'm listening to music or not. And same with so many of our other goals. And so we often think of the arts in a very reductionist way, in a room with four walls or in a building with white walls, that's not accessible to most. But when, as we hear in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and the call to action, the role of arts in Indigenous communities and all communities around the world and all faith is much greater than that. And so that understanding of the role that the arts need to play in, or have played in our history, in our own personal identity, is where we always like to start. So if anyone has any, I'm always interested to hear. So if there's anyone in the chat who also has, whether it's music, whether it's visual art, performance art, music, poetry, spoken word, any artist, please share with us, because we're always looking to build that understanding. And so, yes, so that brings me to what we're doing with this space. When it comes to the Earth Hub space at 5 Bancroft, we are, so at the School of the Environment, we have taken over the ground floor of this space. So it's about approximately 5,000 square feet. And what we're doing is re-envisioning what Toronto could look like. What does a decolonial Toronto look like? And so again, for me as a settler on this land, we've had a lot of Indigenous participation in this project. We don't have any representation today, but I can say one of the inspirations that came for me was for Kent Monkman's. Sorry, I have the book here. For anyone who hasn't seen this, I can't see. Is this? I can't see myself. So can people see this book? Yes.
Yeah, we can.
So the memoirs of Miss Chief Eagle Testicle is a retelling of Canadian history from that perspective. And that was a huge inspiration in shaping this project for me. And us taking on this project was so we received this project 4 years ago, and from Steve Easterbrook, the head of the School of the Environment. And the idea is, what do we do? How can we create the space? And how can we have Indigenous representation in there? And which transitioned to very quickly to, well, what is actually useful in that space? And so that's how it turned from just Indigenous art to, what does a decolonial version of Toronto look like? And in creating that, who do we involve in that process? So it became a much more interesting question. And so what we're starting to do is tell the story of our future. And so this book, for anyone who hasn't seen it, you should go out and get it for sure. But that's kind of where the inspiration has come from in the first place, and where we got started. Yes. Okay. So now, as we took on this project, it was very important for us to deploy the methodology that we've developed over the past few years. So I should say the School for Climate Justice started a few years ago, and we did a lot of projects outside in the community at protests. And the biggest thing that we needed to bring to this space and to this project was, how do we create on-ramps? And so we've done murals all over the city, in Kensington Market, in Oshawa, in Scarborough. But what we've learned is, how do we make sure that community participation is a fundamental part of our process? And so as we began this project, we started with what we've learned. What we've brought to this project is a methodology that starts with past storytelling. If we're going to create a space that goes beyond land acknowledgements, and recognizing land acknowledgements as a fundamental starting point and a huge step forward, how do we take this space so that it's more valuable and more or can lead to action? And so we start with past storytelling. And so I'm just gonna move to the slides here. Um, oh, wait, does this, can I, oh. Do we see that? I'm gonna play one more time. If I can I? Oh. So in November of 2024, we started this project. And I should say, so this 5,000 square foot space, by the end of this project in September, is going to become a visual representation of what a decolonial Toronto looks like. But how do we make sure that there's participation in creating that vision? Who gets to create that vision? Who gets to take part in defining it and articulate what that looks like? Has become a fundamental part of our methodology. And so the over the past 4 months, we've had a series of gatherings. One, so art jams, student gatherings. We've had art jams, so parent art jams, and also so Cafe for the Future, which is an immersive dinner that's been taking place in the space. And so where this inspiration came from is from so recognizing that the conversation, so as much as we want to create something beautiful in this space that can continue to exist, and we can continue to have course partnerships like we have had with ENV 411 and Dr. Machalchuk, how do we make sure that we have a lot of on-ramps for people to participate in this process? And so we took inspiration from a book called Gatherings by Dr. Shirley Nager, and making sure that we, as part of our community engagement process, making sure that students have an opportunity to participate, making sure that Indigenous folks have an opportunity to participate, making sure that anyone who's been touched by colonialism has an opportunity to impact and engage in envisioning what this future looks like, and having those conversations so that we can articulate and move past misunderstandings, learn through, as one of our artists has painted here. Oh, there we go. So learning through misunderstandings, through mistakes, and laughter and joy and pain and suffering. How do we learn through that together? And so every single one of our gatherings has consisted of 3 to 4 hours of folks unpacking what is their relationship to the land. How do they come to be here? What is their connection to their ancestry? And what do they want to see for the future? One thing we've learned after many years of working in this context and in these spaces is we're all enacting a story, our storytelling. And do we want to continue acting the story, enacting the story that we're currently a part of? Or is this an opportunity to create the story for going forward? And so that has been an extremely important or a privileged moment for us, because so having as we look around for everything kind of crumbling and decaying around us, it can be very difficult, as I'm sure you can identify with. It can be sad, it can be upsetting, it can be scary. And those are all extremely important parts of our current experience. It makes sense that we're having those feelings. But what art-based engagement has done for us in this project and the other projects we worked in is it's given us the opportunity to take advantage of this moment. And our privilege in this moment is to help create what's next. And the process of creating and taking ownership and getting involved in creating what's next is at the cornerstone of what drives this project. And so I can tell you from years of working in this space and in associated spaces that it's the only thing that allows me to maintain any sort of sanity is working on what are we creating next. And so as an Afro Caribbean person born in Canada, that there's a shared experience or of being subjugated by colonialism, and why I'm here is as a result of the impacts of colonialism. And so when we were originally asked to engage in this process, building those connections and we've been working with Indigenous artists for a while at that stage, that had become an important part for us. Was how do we make sure that we tell the story together, and make sure that this is a cross-cultural recognition of where we're going together, so that we have those on-ramps for folks to take advantage of this, because there's a lot of us in this moment who don't feel like the story that we're enacting right now represents where we want to go. And so making sure that this is a space that welcomes students and welcomes folks of all backgrounds, whether you're Indigenous, whether you're a settler, or whether you're a newcomer to Toronto, to give you the opportunity to participate in designing what's going forward. Most of us haven't been alive long enough to have created the story that we're currently enacting, but we're alive now, and we have the opportunity to recreate that story going forward. So that's kind of the spirit that we're trying to bring into this project, and to celebrate that. There's so much, again, we're in an election cycle right now, but it's challenging. We're in our most tumultuous relationship with the states. That's also challenging. But it's giving us the opportunity to define who we want to be, and what we want to be, and who we want to do that with. And this is the moment that we're lucky to be alive at this moment. And when I think of the privileges that we have, is to reconnect with folks, to repair some of the harm that has happened, and to build that future together. And so, yeah, I think, and again, and that is exciting. As much as there's pain, and we acknowledge that pain, and we work through that pain. And I look forward to discussing that more in our conversation as to how we structure and what our engagements have been like, and all of the multitude of artists who've taken part so far. Really, what the point that we at School for Climate Justice and Canadian Community Challenge and Dr. Easterbrook, is what we're lucky to know is that if we repair these wounds, our disconnections with the land, our disconnections with one another, that we can build something a lot better. And so how do we do that and celebrate going there and share that? And I don't know a better way than the arts. This is a moment that's so far beyond political. It's so far beyond scientific, that we're talking about identity, and we're talking about values, and we're talking about who we are and who we want to be. And I don't know another way to express that more effectively than the arts. And so that's what this project is all about: celebrating, coming together, and creating that future that we want to be. And whoever wants to be part of that process, I can tell you, that when we first took over the space 4 years ago, when we first got this project, the sponsors for this space were many fossil fuel companies. We know that's not who we want to sponsor the space going forward. And so as part of our methodology, the whole point of these on-ramps is not just so that artists and students have the opportunity to participate, but so that organizations and the sponsors who want to be part of creating that future together also have the opportunity to join. So I apologize for rambling, but yes, I'll throw it back to you.
Thanks, Andre. I think that's great. Minh-Ly, were you going to go ahead as well?
Yeah, sure. I guess for me, I want to talk to some of my side of how I kind of go about in this project, because as someone who's worked around like in youth kind of environments and youth activists, climate activists, it's those spaces, institutional spaces of educational spaces, feel sometimes a bit out of like you can't really speak to it, you can't really be heard, you can't really be and I feel like this project is very important to include students who kind of like voice what they like feel emotions, but care about, and I feel like it's something that during my years at U of T and where I've like done my work in like campaigns like Climate Justice U of T, where like we kind of hold the university very accountable of like to divest from fossil fuels and to hold institutions to divest from fossil fuels. There's kind of like that kind of like that untrust like with institutions and not feeling safe, and I feel like building that space right now, we're still building it, and I feel like it's still continually it will always like there's no like end goal of like right now this is what we want to see. It's going to continue kind of like we want to build that. It's our hub, a Solidar city. We want to build it and see it like be engaged, and eventually all those connections will lead to something that they want to see. So yeah, I guess for me, like it's very much like a storytelling of for me as someone who's Vietnamese, French. I held kind of like those stories of colonialism, and it's very painful for sure. And for us, we want to see a world beyond what colonialism, in a world that centers healing, joy, collective liberation, um, and organizing alongside incredible youth. We're really much on there, like challenging the systems and demanding justice. We're never kind of like using kind of joy as a main value to kind of ground our work. So yeah, art-based engagement is very much it feels like a very connecting and healing way of resisting and of telling a story and telling a story to the institutions, but also to each other by connecting with each other. Because I guess in a very like because for me I studied like environmental studies, and it was like a just transition needs to kind of move away from the extractive kind of economy we've built, like the capitalistic, colonialistic systems that we built. So we often say in our movement, we have to divest. But we also have to invest into our communities and invest into our like joy, healing, invest into the people you care about, the connections, and creating those connections. And I think it's a different way of resisting and a different way of, but it's an important way to kind of value those resistance. And yeah, and I feel like climate justice is very much intersectional and decolonial. And if we want to kind of achieve our goal of climate goals, and for example, the city has a net zero by 2040, those goals needs to include those like very much needy kind of reconnecting, decolonial storytelling. It can't just be science-based, like reducing our emissions. It has to be reconnecting with each other and building a system that's alternative to what we have now, for sure. And it's also about history. It's about reconnecting to our lands where we are right now. There's a lot of stolen lands, exploited labor, science stories that have not been told and that should be heard and talked about. And so that's why those art is a great way to talk about it. And I guess because it's a very painful way of like talking about those things, and it's kind of dismantles that kind of those powers that are still holding it up and who still holds up in the system right now. And for me, because I've always used art as something in my like as to kind of write about, and for youth we often also use social media, like art and social media and kind of telling our stories through social media. So for me, it was very much, I really kind of use social media to kind of to create that digital space. And even though it's like a physical space, but also for people who can't access the space that we're the Earth Hub, through the digital space, people can also connect to it and also be engaged and include in those stories. So for me, it was also that too, and also it also allows for everyone to kind of reclaim their narratives and celebrates the different cultures we have, newcomers, indigenous, me. I feel like I've kind of like let go of my Vietnamese kind of like side, and I want to kind of relearn about my stories in my Vietnamese side, and I feel like people can kind of relearn those, read each other, and be empowered to kind of relearn those stories. And yeah, I think it's the center, the Earth Herb that we're building is very much surrounds with joy and solidarity. Solidarity for me, it would mean like something that's like beyond just charity. It would be more of a yeah, mutual partnership. Solidarity means that to me. It feels we kind of like we can't really just focus on just donating and charity wise. It's a partnership with each other to kind of tackle this system and have built a more just system. It has to be partnerships and also yeah, reconnecting with each other and having relationship with each other, with the land, with not just with each other, but also with Mother Nature. I think it's something that I've learned also with Indigenous, where I'm a settler for this land. It's really important to kind of reconnect with our nature. As someone youth, we kind of feel disconnected from our land, and it's also that through art we can also do that, and we can truly see this kind of connection of land, nature, relationship with each other, and reclaiming those relationship and kind of truly liberating ourselves, to see this kind of built just future that we want, and so that's why it's very exciting for me to see that, and it's more joyful, and I think I would really much like to see this happening into beyond U of T, not just like at school environment. It's that's I think it's a replicable thing that we want to see, like that if it works, if we'll be working with other institutions and also other communities where we have like we also work in Malvern, and Malvern, this kind of also art-based engagement is also super successful, and if this work we want to see that kind of expand, and that's why I feel like it's kind of the beginning, but it's still in process, and I feel like everyone here could be involved, and anyone could be involved. So yeah, that's kind of my side. Also, I want to kind of like, I saw a lot of comments. I don't know if we want to read them.
So before we get to those, there's one quote from gatherings that I want to end with before we move into more conversation. So this is a quote from Gatherings, which is a book that was given to me by Joshua Fernandez, who's one of our facilitators that we've worked with. And so the quote goes, "Alliances that exemplify and model nation-to-nation respect are needed in communities, government offices, and legislative chambers. Perhaps we need an image, a way to reimagine how we can begin again and go forward together on this continent." And that really resonated for me because one of the things where this work came from is when when you think about UNDRIP and bringing these articles into action, it's the difficult part isn't understanding and relating to why these need to happen. It's envisioning how does that happen. And the difficult part is coming together to make that happen. And so we really hope that this space can be an example of how we can come together, nation to nation, all of us who are on this land, make our mistakes, do things positively, and create a bolder and more exciting vision for going forward.
So I do see some comments. I was just wondering, before maybe jumping into it, if you can talk a little, because you and Minh-Ly shared a point on how the space, when you started working on this, how like people, like someone called or something to say like what's happening, like so I feel like that's a really important, like, I don't know, just, yeah, if you could just talk briefly to that for folks here.
Yeah, I'd love to. So it's very important for us. So we start with actually I don't have that image up, unfortunately. So um the let me see if I can get it. No, actually we'll come back to that. So the first thing that we painted in the space was myself. I was there. Unfortunately, Minh-Ly was stuck abroad, still trying to get her visa to come back into the country. So she was supporting from abroad at first. We're very happy to have her here. But it was myself, Steve, and the first artist who painted, which is Renaissance. And so we always start from a place of graffiti art with all of our projects, because the graffiti has always been a voice of counterculture, a voice of the marginalized, a voice of people of color, of folks who don't have the privilege to take up space. And so it was very important for us as we started to begin this conversation, and that's what the space is. The space for now will continue to be a conversation. And so we're in the middle of the project right now. The space will continue to be a conversation until it turns into the vision that this conversation all articulated in September. And so to start off this conversation, one of our artists in residence, Renaissance, whose stuff you've all seen all around the city. We'll put up an image when we move into the first piece that went up. And but because it's graffiti, and nobody other than myself, the head of the school environment, knew that was coming. The following morning, when facilities and people started to come into the building, they wondered what was going on. And so at that point, Dr. Easterbrook had just left for a lecture tour. So there was a little while where this conversation was, what's going on? How was graffiti ended up in this building? And of course, campus facilities has a responsibility to remove any graffiti for obvious reasons within 48 hours. And so that, luckily, Steve did end up weighing back in on this conversation. And when folks, and what we love about that is when folks realize that this is part of this conversation, how much they've now recognized how important this conversation is, and have all become a part of this. So I mentioned that we've done art jams in the space, but we've also done course partnerships, and are working on department partnerships. And now we're very excited because we've started to begin conversations, because when we first thought of this, we're like, okay, 9 to 10 months for us to engage with folks, and give the opportunity for input should be enough to articulate what the space should be. But the amount of support and interest in engaging from departments, from faculty, from students, and participating in this conversation, and putting more graffiti on the wall so that people can see their concerns in there, see their questions, work through misperceptions, ignorances. These are cultures we've been kept apart for a long time. So to be able to work through some of these questions together and see yourself represented and see that other people are thinking and questioning the same things, has been an important part of that process. And so that, having that open up that conversation and so perfectly identify the need for why these conversations are important, where they need to be had, and to allow people to participate in that. I think I couldn't have been more perfectly personified.
Thank you for sharing that quick story. That's very funny, and but it also maybe demonstrates the immediate pushback against graffiti as an art form. It seems like it exemplifies how graffiti is seen, must take it down because it is counterculture, because it is distressing to the, I don't know, status quo. And
Yeah.
I think positioning it with I think I'm thinking with like Indigenous art in particular, I find that Indigenous artists over history and in contemporary time are using graffiti a lot. It's I learned this in an Indigenous art class that this is graffiti and guerrilla art and so on has been used in many cases with Indigenous peoples. It's very it's inaccessible and as accessible, affordable, and dissenting opportunity to spread awareness of Indigenous issues in Canada. And then often, I'm thinking of one Indigenous graffiti artist in particular, or a group of artists. I think they were Wendigo. I'd have to pull up the link. Oh, and thank you for the link, Minh-Ly, in the chat to your graffiti. But they talked about I believe it's the Wendigo group or Wendigo Army. I have to check. And they would spray paint and deface public property and also turning like repurposing or scavenging different items around the city, like making sculptures or making so and so, and it's very fascinating and creative. I'd also just like to point out a question in the chat, which could probably jump off an earlier point Minh-Ly was making about some collaborations or going beyond U of T, beyond the School of the Environment. So we have Maria who asked, I think this is pushing the scope of like pushing beyond U of T. So what does the City of Toronto have planned to add Indigenous art presence to its parks, buildings, gardens, and landscape, if at all? Because they would love to see more Indigenous art murals on bridges, sides of buildings. So if you have any perspective on how Indigenous art presence is going in Toronto beyond the university, I think we'd be happy to hear.
Yeah, I can attempt to answer that. So one of our artists in residence is Nishina at Nishkish on Instagram, is a big part of street art in Toronto, and Indigenous street art, and helps lead a collective. Her creative outputs go far beyond street art, but it's an important part of her work. And so there you can see the dividers on bike lanes, they've got a lot of those. There's a bridge near just west of King and Shaw that her and the collective, some of the Indigenous artists who we've worked with, Samai, Danielle, and SJ have all worked on. So it's popping up, and there are more of those opportunities coming. But so those are some of the artists, and we can put those names. Minh-Ly, I think, has if you can put their ats in the chat, would be great so people that you can follow. But we also work with the City of Toronto, and so the interest is there, and I think there's also a balance, and that's something that we're in the conversations that we're having. It's Indigenous art. So how would I phrase this? I think one of the things that's very interesting to us, and take some of the ownership off, because as much as we absolutely celebrate Indigenous art as part of this project, the weight of, okay, let's fill the city with Indigenous art is a lot to carry, and is that the only goal? And I think that's something that we are trying to balance in this project as well, is having Indigenous art be a fundamental part and having artists take place, but also creating the relationships and the understanding that where that art comes from, the belief systems in there is part of what's also important, right? And that's what we're hoping with cultural collaborations between Indigenous and non-Indigenous, that we take some of that ownership off of just Indigenous artists to carry these messages and to help learn through and learn with each other on how we don't just tokenize Indigenous art and make sure that it becomes is the creativity and that spirit of creativity and the messages and the connection to the land that's inherent within that work, that not only Indigenous artists create, but help others connect to that work and help communicate in that language as well. So yeah, I think that's the best I can answer that. But if anybody else has a response that they want to throw in.
I think that was quite helpful, and I really appreciate that aphorism you mentioned at the end of how the considerations one must have to avoid tokenizing or in creating engagement fatigue or art fatigue, activism fatigue, and those undue pressures, and let people make art for art's sake and for whatever goals they have, but it's not out of someone else's goals or someone else's agenda. We have some links from Minh-Ly, the Nishina artist account, thank you very much. And then Lois shared a book, Indigenous Toronto, by Emiko. I'm sure you've loved her already, but thank you very much. And I see we have a few minutes left. So do we have any other questions? Please put them in the chat or raise your hand or just unmute and go ahead. I'm also very fascinated. I love how this came up near the end of the session because I want to hear so much more about it, but collaborations with the City of Toronto is fantastic. That's very fascinating. We have a raised hand from Maria.
Let me know if you can hear me okay. I'm using a headpiece.
We can, thank you.
Awesome. And thank you for answering my question about the City of Toronto. So that was mine. I always walk through Toronto. I'm in the downtown core, and I always look at stuff like, I look at empty walls, and for some reason, art is always on my mind. And here, today's topic of Indigenous presence and stuff, I'm just thinking, yeah, that's what we need. And I've seen some of this art. In fact, there is, I feel like it's Lower Simcoe. There's a bridge, downtown Lower Simcoe in front and Bremner, where there are Indigenous, there's art there displaying Indigenous people on an individual base. So there's a face of one person, face of another. So, and it's just beautiful. And but I'd love to see more of that. But something was said here. Mason, you said something, and I'm sorry, sir, I don't have your name because it says Canadian Climate Challenge.
It's Andre. Keep going.
Andre, thank you. So I didn't understand the comment about too much. Is it, so were you saying that we can definitely improve on the quantity of Indigenous art, the Indigenous art presence in, like, let's say Toronto or something? Or is it too much? Like, sorry, I didn't understand. Were you trying to say that we don't want to do too much of it? We just want art for art's sake?
No. Thank you. And thank you for asking, because that's definitely, I don't want anyone leaving with that misinterpretation. We work with a lot of Indigenous artists and who are looking for work, but it's also exhausting at the same time. Who are looking for opportunities, but it's also most of which we work with are also very overwhelmed with the amount of work. So it's just the amount of projects we want. I just want to make sure that, as I think Mason mentioned, is fatigue, making sure that we're not putting all of this weight just on Indigenous artists and expecting to all of a sudden, let's recreate the city. How do we support that is part of I've yet to meet an artist, whether a street artist, Indigenous artist who's working in public projects, who's well compensated and has enough time and like rest and the ability to deliver on the kind of scale that we would like to see. And so all I'm trying to say is having that kind of balance to make sure that we're compensating and giving folks enough time and the opportunity to represent themselves. And
thank you.
Yeah.
That makes more sense to me. And is it okay if I just continue with another question? Or I may be idealistic. I always think positive. I always think, oh, it must be easy. But would it be wrong to have the city create, like, not a contest, I'm so sorry, some kind of project where we bring in new artists, and hopefully the funding doesn't have to come from completely the city. There could be donations. I'd love to donate as well, towards the artist, and say whatever, but a group of artists, and with public donations, and some kind of a project, maybe even yearly, to just, so you're right, we don't want to tire people, but it's lovely to see new artists. It's a way of bringing in new artists. It's not always like painting on a wall. It's not always graffiti. It could be a statue, it could be anything. But does anyone here, because you all look young and I'm not so young, does anyone remember the time when we had moose everywhere, where moose took over? And that was such a way of, it represented Canada pride and all of this. I just love to see all the individually, personally stylized moose out there. There are still a few here and there, and they're fantastic. I don't know, that just brought me joy. And I don't know, maybe that was too much. But couldn't we do something? Is the city even interested? And again, I'm probably just a dreamer. I'm done, hands down.
We love dreamers. So, and I share that dream. And I do definitely remember the moose all over the city. And yes, there are a few left. But I love that vision, Maria. And maybe that's where we end off, is that vision of I'm 1000% on board with having more Indigenous art all throughout the city, and I'm sure most people are. And all I was trying to say is to make sure that we're doing that together in support and with the right level of compensation, and making sure is that what Indigenous artists also want and Indigenous folks also want, and not projecting that as well. So that's mostly what I'm trying to say, is collaborating together to create this vision together, and then support that, and making sure that people are not having fatigue. And we're hoping that our project and our work together brings up this question more and more. And then as we envision the city of what it could look like, that perhaps that's a part of what it can look like.
Can I have like a bit of for me it's like from my point of view is, we want to make it more meaningful, to have like something where those art can also lead to action, and those arts also meaningful and later on engage into the vision of the future of Toronto. So like it's not just about art as being just kind of look at, but also to kind of like have those many people collaborate and partner together to put something on the wall, and then those things on the wall kind of inspire to kind of have that vision, and to kind of like inspire also the city and the communities to kind of engage in those actions. So it's more of an engagement kind of a process, and even though yes, it's beautiful, it's joyful, but it's also to include more people to kind of like, oh, I want to see this happening in Toronto. I want to see more healthcare, more education, more kind of like a vision that we have all together. And I think that's like more meaningful. And I feel like I think Indigenous artists want to see that more. Like that's like their art is more meaningful as being part of like the city strategies for something that's like climate related or climate transition. And that's still joyful. I feel like it's still a joyful way of using art. But yeah, it's I think that's how I see it.
Thank you for that addition. And both of your answers. I hope you're seeing all of the thank yous in the chat, Andre and Minh-Ly. People are very appreciative. We do have another question in the chat, and if you're okay with it, I would love to proceed with it as William has a question and he is still in the call. So if you're okay with going a few minutes over, I think it'd be great to answer this. So William asks, how long will or does the art stay up? Is it permanent? What is the relationship with permanence? That's a great second question. And will there be an attempt to continue this process for future generations of students?
So great question, William. That was so we made a decision a while ago where we only engage with projects that are ongoing. And so that's part of the challenge when you have just a piece of artwork that's like a mural. We've done many murals around the city. Is the opportunity for engagement with it is often short-lived. You walk past it, you appreciate it for a moment, but how do we foster more action? And I think that's a little bit what Minh-Ly was speaking to, is one of the challenges we're looking at here and we're trying to achieve with this project. Is so so to answer that question is we're over the next, it will take us until September until we transition this space fully from what it is now to a visual representation. And then the idea is that, and what we're hoping to do, and we've started doing it, is to develop more partnerships with different professors, with different courses, with different departments, so that it's a kind of a living piece of art, and so that it's continually changing. So as we go to the final stages, augmented reality will become a part of it, so that there's a digital component to allow other artists who can only contribute digitally, so that in future representations or realizations, that there's also it gives folks who don't have the ability to come to the space to also contribute to that vision. And this is a fundamental part of making sure that it's participatory and not so tokenistic, to that an Indigenous space can help, and a decolonial space can help us all think and come together in this way, so that we have the opportunity not only to appreciate the art, but for that art to catalyze action, partnership, and movement towards a better future together. And so this by September, it will be finished for this year, and we're working on it continuing to be a living and an adaptable space for the next few years. But once that's done, it's meant to stay up in perpetuity. I think is what the contract currently calls for. So yes, it will be there for quite a long time.
I think that is fantastic, and we have much to look forward to, much more art to look forward to. If that is the last question, then I think we are good to wrap up. Or you could also add any other comments, if you have any, Minh-Ly or Andre. But I would first just like to thank you both so much for joining us in this conversation. I am really appreciative and proud to have this connection with the School for Climate Justice and also Andre's Canadian Climate Challenge as related, and with the School of the Environment. I think the IERC, our research center, and the School for Climate Justice can have many more substantial collaborations and remain in conversation. So this is a great start, and I'm very happy for this connection. I'm also very grateful for well, those who stayed in the call past the time. Thank you so much, and just everyone who came before and engaged thoroughly with answering the questions about our favorite art and asking questions. We really appreciate it. I would just for the few people who are in the chat, I'm pasting in the chat right now that we have one more event for April on next Wednesday. And then I put all of our links there. But I think this was an amazing conversation about art and climate justice. If you
Yes, and thank
go
you so
ahead.
much for having us. Thank you both, Mason and Lewis, for having us. And we really, this is the beginning of this work. This is the beginning of this path, and so I'm very excited to and these relationships. I'm very excited to see where we go together. And thank you all for coming and participating. And shout out to the person who said "Seasons of Love" is their favorite Broadway song. Also one of mine.
Thank you so much also. I would really love that you guys reached out on social media and I were like kind of contacted, and it's kind of a very much I think it's a collaboration that's very much needed, and the research that you do on deepening knowledge on Indigenous is very important. And I would love to see that happening into like kind of included in our project, because we need like all the knowledge we need, like from this project we need all the knowledge from different perspective, and I think IERC is very valuable and important for that.
Thank you both so much. I'll also reiterate my great thanks. And I also just had an idea, like I don't know, a QR code or something. Maybe we can talk in the future, like in that space. That would be maybe something cool so folks can access deepening knowledge. But yeah, thank you everyone for being here and for your amazing work. We can also share out like any of this information of future events on our listserv. So if anyone here is not on the IERC listserv, do make sure to get involved like Mason said. So yeah. Thanks, and hope everyone has an amazing afternoon.